What's going on, guys? This is Sam, and there's been a lot of Apple news lately, more so than I was anticipating. The Mac Pro has been delayed, future iPhones could have curved screens, and Siri might finally be getting better in the future. There's a lot to talk about. As always, let's go ahead and jump in. First up, what I think is the biggest story is that the Mac Pro has been delayed. This is not a rumor, this is not coming from a third-party source, this is coming from Apple themselves. Apple recently sat down with TechCrunch and told them that the Mac Pro was not coming until 2019, and I think that's going to make a lot of professionals pretty upset. It's weird because the Mac Pro was last updated in 2013. It is 2018. If we push that date to 2019 when Apple says the Mac Pro is going to launch, it'll be nearly 6 years since that computer designed for professionals, people that need a lot of power, that need the latest specs, has been updated, which seems kind of weird and pretty backward. Apparently, to fill this gap, Apple has released the iMac Pro, and in talking to TechCrunch, they wanted to specifically let professionals know that it has been pushed back until 2019, and that if institutions or people that are pros want to buy a great new computer, that the Mac Pro is there to fill that void, to fill that gap until 2019 when the Mac Pro is released. At the same time, I feel like that's a really heavy compromise because a lot of people don't want an all-in-one for their Pro work. And I totally get that. I've looked at the iMac Pro, and the more I look at it, the more I feel like it's just the perfect computer for what I do. And I think it's probably the perfect computer for what a lot of professionals do in general, but at the same time, you can't really upgrade it. And that's been a big pain point for professionals with the iMac lineup in general. Overall, this is pretty bad news that the Mac Pro was delayed. I think most people could agree on that, but there was some good news that came out of this. While Apple sat down with TechCrunch, they mentioned that they have a special, quote, pro workflow team, end quote, working on this new computer, which was really good to hear because rather than Apple taking a shot in the dark and saying, hey, here's the 2018 Mac Pro, we think this is what professionals want, but we don't really know for sure. We just kind of made this computer based on what we ourselves thought. They're reaching out to professionals. There's a team of actual creative professionals that Apple has hired on to advise them on future Mac computers. Direct feedback from a group that Apple's marketing a product to is very important, not just for Apple, but for any company. So I think it's incredible that Apple has realized it's a good idea to ask creatives what they want rather than just pushing out a product and hoping that that group accepts it. As somebody who does creative work, I'm so happy to see that Apple has this pro workflow consulting team, and I think because of that, the next Mac Pro is going to be even better than I anticipated before. Now, a few days before we heard news about the Mac Pro, a report from Bloomberg came out, and this one is pretty big. It says by 2020, Apple plans to replace Intel chips in Mac computers with Apple's own design chips. They did this with the iPhones years ago when we saw the A4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and the A11 Bionic chip is still the fastest mobile processor in any phone on the market by a decent margin. Bloomberg's report was apparently huge news for investors as Intel shares dropped as much as 9.2% when this report came out, showing that a lot of people are kind of worried about what a future without Apple using Intel chips in Apple's Mac lineup means. Because we don't have a lot of information on this and because it's going to be at least 2 or 3 years out at the very earliest, we don't know what this could mean or if the processors would get a lot better or faster or be more efficient. I assume that because Apple would have complete control over the processor design, they would. That would make sense to me, but we just don't know right now. I don't have that many thoughts or opinions on this right now. I think that's a huge undertaking for Apple, and as this report says, as every report says, plans could get delayed, it could get pushed back to the future, it might not happen at all. But Bloomberg does have a good track record, and if this report is true, Apple processors could make their way first to the MacBook and other devices in 2020, effectively replacing Intel entirely. Just in general this year, Bloomberg has been on fire for reporting what Apple's working on. They've told us that the iPhone 10 Plus is coming later this year, that we're going to see a second generation iPhone 10 and even a third new iPhone model, a 6.1-inch version with an LCD screen made of cheaper materials. On top of the Mac report about Apple ditching Intel processors, they came out with yet another report just recently talking about touchless iPhone controls and curved screens coming to the iPhone lineup in 2020 or 2021. First, I want to talk about curved iPhone screens coming in the future made possible by OLED or OLED technology. I think it's a fascinating idea, but I'm also really happy with flat iPhone screens right now. I think that if Apple could do something really interesting with them, maybe change the way the OS works because of it, or really customize how you interact with the iPhone because of this curved display, it could be a fantastic idea rather than just a gimmick. Because this is so far away, probably 2020, 2021 at the very earliest, we don't know a lot about it, but Apple is exploring the idea that maybe an iPhone in the future could have a curved display, and that to me is extremely interesting. Now, if you remember back just a few years, we saw the LG G Flex and the LG G Flex 2. We have no idea if what the Bloomberg report is suggesting could make the next iPhone in 2020 or 2021 look like this, but this is totally what I'm envisioning in my head right now. This had that really cool self-healing back on it. I doubt that the iPhone would have that, but the big features of these LG G Flex phones was, of course, the screen. The screen was curved inward from top to bottom. It looked sort of weird, but it got pretty great reviews throughout the Android community. This phone was released, and rather than people saying we don't like this, we don't want a curved display, people seem to really enjoy it. So I think there's definitely a market for curved displays, and it will be fascinating to see what Apple does with this idea or concept with a future iPhone. I mean, an iPhone 10 with a curved display could definitely look super cool. The same report from Bloomberg also talks about the fact that they are working on touchless gestures for a future iPhone model. Once again, probably 2 or 3 years away, where instead of having to actually place your finger on the screen and scroll or interact with your iPhone, you could hover it close to the screen and maybe scroll or tap or interact with the phone. And I immediately thought of those Samsung gimmicky gestures that we saw a while back where you could wave your hand up or down and it would maybe turn a page, or you could interact with the iPhone that way by waving or swiping in front of the screen. Those feel really gimmicky. I've never actually seen someone use those on a Samsung product ever, and the report talks about how Samsung has worked on those in the past. And I feel like Apple could maybe do something with those on the iPhone, but I'm also really skeptical just because I feel like the most effective way to do anything is by tapping the screen. I think it'd be really cool if maybe your iPhone was sitting far away from you, or it was just out of reach, that you could possibly use it by reaching out and almost touching it and maybe swiping. So if it was like this far away from me, I could swipe on it from here. That could possibly be beneficial. Or if you're watching a movie and you had it set up somewhere, you could like reach out and tap to stop it. That would be really cool. That would not be very gimmicky, but if it was just like, oh, you're on the home screen, you can swipe now, or you can raise your hand an inch above the phone and do that, I don't know if there would be a lot of purpose or value there. I think there's a lot of potential for curved screens. I think there's a lot of potential for touchless gestures. Apple generally does a really good job of making features that other companies have done in the past more useful on their own products. We'll have to see if that is the case in the future in 2020 or 2021 with curved displays and touchless gestures. There's one last piece of Apple news along with curved screens and touchless gestures that is very exciting, and that is the fact that Siri, after years of apparently being left in the dark, could finally be getting better. Over the past few months, I've talked about Siri a lot. I just talked about it in my HomePod review, and a lot of you seem to agree, which made me really happy, not because I'm glad that Siri is bad, but I'm glad that a lot of other Apple users like myself realize that Siri just isn't that good in the platform's current state. And apparently, Apple has also realized that as well. It may have taken them a few years to get here, but they are finally here. According to ThinkNum, Siri job listings are at an all-time high. I think they added over 150 new job listings for Siri engineers just in the past week or two, which is really good news because obviously the more people that Apple hires to work on the Siri platform, you would think logically the better the Siri platform would get. I think Apple has finally realized that Siri isn't as good as they maybe thought it was before. Because they were so sidetracked with other products like the iPhone 10, they're going to focus a lot of attention on Siri in the future. I cannot wait until I can make a video where I can look into the camera, look at all of you and say, Siri's better than Amazon Alexa. Siri's better than the Google Assistant. Siri, I think, is better than Bixby right now because Bixby is a lot worse than Siri in a lot of different ways. But I look forward to the day where I can say Siri is the best assistant on the market. I can't say that right now, but because of all these new job listings, I might be able to say it again in the future. On top of all those other job listings for Siri, there is some even better news because Apple just hired Google's AI chief, and I would argue that Google has long been the king of AI. You can see the guy's name is John Giandrea. I actually didn't hear about him before Apple hired him. This sounds like a really great acquisition because Giandrea was the chief of search and artificial intelligence at Google. The company behind the best and most famous search engine in the world is now working for Apple, presumably on AI and search related products there, hopefully Siri specifically. One last thing that I wanted to mention before wrapping up the video is that Apple celebrated their 42nd birthday on April 1st, 2018, which was just a couple of days ago at the time of recording this. Kind of crazy to think that a company as big and influential as Apple is was only founded 42 years ago in 1976. That is all the Apple news that I have for you this week. Siri's hopefully getting better. The Mac Pro has been delayed. Mac chips in 2020 won't be Intel. They'll probably be Apple designed. And touchless gestures and curved displays could be coming to iPhones near you in 2 or 3 years. A lot of this stuff is pretty pretty far out. A lot of the things we're talking about will not be happening in 2018, but these are a lot of good changes that I'm very excited to hear and talk about. If you like the shirt I'm wearing and you want to grab one for yourself, you can head over to shop.iupdateos.com. That helps support the channel. I genuinely appreciate that. And if you enjoyed watching this video, you can drop a like down below and hit subscribe if you want to see more Apple News videos in the future. For now, I've been Sam. I hope all of you are doing great, and I'll talk to you in my next video.